Well, good afternoon, boys and goyim. This is Vincent Bird of the 11th Hour Internet Messenger in the Church of Jesus Christ Christian, and my message today is entitled Terrorism, and I'm going to touch on the Bill of Rights while I'm at it. Now, terrorism is something that we hear in the news all the time, and we generally conjure up the thoughts of radical Islam, right-wing jihadists trying to destroy America and the Western way of life. That may or may not be true with a few, but what I do know above all else is that a few thousand Muslims in the world, of a billion or so, are holding America hostage with the trillions of dollars that have been spent on national security, the Patriot Act, all of the Homeland Security alphabet soup groups that reside under that jurisdiction, and the grief and pain that we go through just to travel around the country on our aircraft. So these Muslims are a lot more clever than our own government. A few thousand of them with a few threats and a few emails to each other that's being picked up by the NSA will put the country on alert and put law enforcement in the streets and roadblocks and all kinds of things that cost money, and they're just whittling away at us financially. It's not enough that the Jews are doing it. Now the Muslims are doing it with just a few thousand people, and they're not even stealing the money. They're just making us spend it. How clever they are. Anyway, my presentation is entitled Terrorism and Who Are the Real Terrorists, and I'm going to touch on a couple of other subjects like I like to do. Our head of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano, and the former head of the TSA, those who screen we free citizens at all airports, declare that returning veterans from the Middle East and old white guys are the real terrorists threatening America. Now, why do you suppose that, of all the forces in the world that really threaten America and the American way of life, that they selected veterans and old white guys like me? Well, boys and Shabbos Goy, it is because the goddamn Jew is afraid of us, and they have convinced their treasonous bootlickers in our government that we are a threat to national security. We white true patriots and veterans who have a clear understanding of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, national sovereignty, and what is righteous and true, and haven't had our memory tainted by the Marxist Gramsci educational system that we so enjoy in America today. We don't buy into the New World Order agenda of demeaning America, ruining our economy, and taking more and more of our freedoms each and every minute by the communist infiltrated government and even our elected officials who are communists through and through. Maybe not card-carrying communists, but they are certainly agitated by the communists. Yes, boys and goyim, Jewish communism is alive and well in America and is thriving quite nicely, thank you very much. It's the Jews, stupid. If you look at my Pastor Butler civil trial presentation that I just put up the other day, you will see the outrageous fines levied by the good and true white citizens of North Idaho in their attempt to tell the world that they not only hate their own race, but that they hate free speech and are led by their nose rings by the Jews and the Jew bootlickers that have the white enclave in the white Northwest leading them around by that nose ring. Human rights task forces abound in these white territories of the North. And why do you suppose these organizations need to exist in an area where there is a population of less than 2 or 3% of people of color, including the Native Americans? Well, Shabbos Goy, they are there to instill in the minds of the sheeple that the notion of diversity and multiculturalism, all communist doctrines, to bring down the moral fiber of America and encourage race mixing. They don't care about human rights at all, and will be those who will storm into your houses and homes in the middle of the night and begin to take you away to their kangaroo courts to sentence you to prison or death if you don't fall into the party line and abrogate your patriotism. You don't think it can happen here when Obama, Bama, your nigger president, because he's not mine, is re-elected, and he will be. You may be certain that the communist agenda will surface in full bloom with no need of any candy coating anymore to see who's behind the progressive, liberal, and Democrat description. It will be in your face communism, and you will fall into line or be taken away. When I was returned by U.S. Marshals to face my Idaho DUIs after apprehension by the FBI in New Mexico, the local court in Sandpoint, Idaho levied a bond on me. At my arraignment, Judge Heisey looked down from her throne and magnanimously declared that I was such a criminal that she set my bond for a DUI at $3 million. I begged her at the time to set it for $1 billion. It was all the same to me. $3 million is quite a statement for a DUI, wouldn't you think? The highest bond ever set in North Idaho for any crime ever. Maybe in the entire state. No terrorist who ever had national attention had a bond set that high. So we know what the authorities of the United States think of we white patriots. Former servicemen and older white guys who have not been thoroughly indoctrinated by the communist school systems and not bowing to the Jew-controlled government in the United States of America. They surveil us. They find any number of means to bring sometimes vague and sometimes egregious charges against us to imprison us. The longer the sentence, the better. When the marshals brought me back to New Mexico for my possession of a sawed-off shotgun charge, they stacked charges against me. I mentioned this before, but I'm going to instill in your mind how the government can screw you 4 ways from Sunday. Don't get me wrong, I did break the law. I am a criminal. Let me give you the details. I fled from the felony DUI in Idaho just before my jury selection at trial. I could not find an attorney to defend me without paying him tens of thousands of dollars, and I even had to try and get that guy from out of state because no one in Idaho would defend me. My notoriety as a friend of my pastor Richard Butler, and my mass mailings over the years and speeches at colleges made me a target of the ADL, who controls the FBI. And don't be fooled, they do control the FBI. They train them, they indoctrinate them, they teach them in the methods and ways that various patriotic groups are attacking the Jew for their nefarious activities in the government, in the financial world, in the legal system, and medical profession. Okay, so I knew the judge was going to sentence me to 5 years in prison for this DUI, and I was not going to go into an Idaho prison for 5 years, period. So I left. My family had left long before this because they were tired of my notoriety, and they set up residences in another state. Well, when I finally reconnected with them when I was on the run, I had convinced them because at the time my activities on the DUI in Idaho were not national yet, and so I convinced them that my Idaho problems were taken care of. Every time that I visited, they were under the impression that I was just traveling around on my own, and that I had paid my fines or did a little 30-day sentence for my DUI in Idaho. They had no idea until I was finally apprehended by the FBI that I was a fugitive that had done an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Anyway, I thought that Bonner County would simply issue a warrant for my arrest and wait for some law enforcement official in another state to snag me on a traffic or other misdemeanor if I made a mistake and return me to Idaho for the DUI charge. I did not know at that time that I became a felon immediately because the government charged me with unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. That's a federal offense which placed me under the federal government jurisdiction immediately. This is for a DUI in Idaho, unthinkable at the time, and it would have never happened in any other state with any other individual, but it happened to me. The instant that happened, I became a prohibited person. That's a legal term. That means that I was to be treated no different than a convicted felon, which meant that I could not possess any firearms, bullets, explosives, gunpowder, chemicals, and a number of other restrictions that are usually imposed on a convicted felon. The charges began to stack after my apprehension by the FBI. I always had a sawed-off shotgun in my vehicle and in my home for protection. I also had 8 other firearms, not in my possession at the time, but the FBI and the prosecutors claimed that I had, another legal term, dominion and control over them, which added to my charges, stacking more charges to assure a conviction. Then they began to count the number of bullets that I had to fit in all those different firearms, and it was several hundred. They began to stack charges even more, which could have, if they wanted to, added 1 year's sentence for each bullet that they found. Are you fine patriots out there finally getting the idea? Then they charged me with interfering with interstate commerce because the guns were purchased in one state and taken to another. So now are you really getting the idea? This could have gone on for page after page in Title 18 of the Criminal Code. If the government wants you and to make an example out of you, you are compelled to take whatever deal that they offer so that you don't spend a goodly portion of the rest of your life in prison. Due process in the government speak means that they are going to process you like putting tomatoes in cans on an assembly line, no less. Well, my due process took over a year. Then my due process sentence was nearly 4 years. There was no harm or foul to anyone or anything, but I got nearly 4 years in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, but only if you want to live a life of obscurity and hide from the forces that seek to destroy our way of life. If you are an outspoken advocate of truth and a nefarious Jew and their government sycophants, you will be targeted. The jails are full of us, and more are arrested each and every day. I will tell you what they did to Edgar Steele, my friend and brave patriot, who will now die in prison. The FBI framed Edgar Steele, and don't candy coat it, and don't believe anything else that they would tell you. They framed him. It was so blatant and obvious that a 4-year-old that never even been to school, if they watched how that came down, they would have said, "Oh my, this is like watching a fiction movie." Anyway, they framed Edgar Steele on a bomb plot to kill his own damn family. The FUBAR FBI agents had to really reach for this one. They hired an informant that they had used before to befriend Edgar and do some work on Edgar's property, his and his wife's property. They acted as agents provocateurs, as they do in all white separatist groups and militia organizations, to provoke illegal acts like they did with Randy Weaver, Aryan Nations, and others. That is why I associate with no one. I am around no one. I want no one around me. I don't go to congregations, and I don't congregate with anybody. I don't hang with anybody. The FBI will have to find another way to snag me, but they'll find a way, I know it. Anyway, this FBI provocateur fashioned a couple of bombs and put them in Edgar's vehicles. Later, he said Edgar paid him to do it. One was found under his wife's car while she was having it serviced a few days later. It could never have exploded the way it was constructed, and the obvious subterfuge to frame Edgar for this crime went beyond the pale. He was not allowed to present evidence that would have exonerated him and proved that the FBI did plot to have him arrested and put him away for a lifetime. They altered so-called recordings that were made between Edgar Steele and other individuals. It was so obvious. Edgar hired 2 out-of-state forensic audiologists to verify that these tapes were construed and constructed by third parties, which obviously was the FBI. Why? Because Edgar was doing what I do, except more eloquently and without clarity. After his defense of Richard Butler in the civil trial in 2000, the Jews went after him, and after him they went. Because the FBI are the bootlickers of the ADL, it didn't take much for them to convince the FBI that Edgar was getting too much attention with his conspiracy pen pal page and his television interviews, his lectures at various militia groups and white separatist groups throughout the country on television, and the Nickel Rant publication that he had done for about 5 years. He had to be stopped, and stopped he was by our treasonous government. He was sentenced to 30 years and will die in prison, as I've mentioned before. Beware of your government. Now back to my situation. 4 FBI agents arrested me in New Mexico. Not one of them had ever served in the military. Not one had a clue about the Constitution or Bill of Rights, and even knew much about the law. I found this to be true in every detention and prison facility that the correctional officers maintain control over, and that oversaw us minute by minute. Once you are processed, you are simply warehoused by automatons who are there to keep the peace and order within these jails and prisons. They could care less about the law. You are simply another whining, sniveling criminal complaining about your lot in life. After all, isn't everyone innocent? I want to talk a little about double jeopardy. They say double jeopardy is against the against the Constitution. Well, let me tell you, double jeopardy exists every day. And here's how the feds do it. If they can't get a conviction on one charge, they're not supposed to be able to retry you on that charge, unless new evidence comes in that is profound. Now, what they do is they just stack another charge. They find another charge very closely related to the charge that you were originally charged with. And if that doesn't work, they'll throw you in the state jurisdiction. It's an entirely different jurisdiction. So now they can do the double jeopardy even under the same charge under state law, because these guys work hand in glove with one another. Okay, now here's the plight of the Native Americans. The Native American reservations are sovereign nations, and the sovereign nations are self-governing. Well, they're not really self-governing. They're supposed to be, and it's all done by treaty. And believe me, treaties are above the Constitution. All treaties that the United States government makes, either with foreign powers or with our homegrown Native American Indians, are above the Constitution. So the natives are supposed to have a sovereign nation and be self-governed. But because they allow themselves to take certain benefits from the Department of Interior, which oversees reservations and the Native American population in America and the 540 some odd tribes that are in the United States of America, these natives, by virtue of the fact that they take certain government benefits, medical benefits, maybe money, lands, utilities, whatever the Department of Interior gets, that puts them automatically under federal jurisdiction. So if a Native American commits a crime on a reservation, they can be tried in a Native Indian court by Native judges and by Native law enforcement. They have their own police force. They have everything that a nation would have. However, if the crime is high visibility enough, and or the government, FBI, wants to make an example out of you, and they do this virtually every day on a reservation around the country, they will come on that reservation, that sovereign nation, and recharge that Native American with the same charge that the courts on the reservation charge that native with. So there goes double jeopardy for the Native American. Anyway, my point is that the double jeopardy is alive and well, and they can screw you 4 ways from Sunday with this so-called protection. Clever animals that these prosecutors are. So anyway, and yes, the government is prosecuting real terrorists, getting back to my main message, and who are part and parcel to the extreme Muslim fringe, or are they a fringe, who wish to do damage to we Westerners. It isn't because we are the great Satan, sometimes expounded by these radicals. It isn't because they are jealous of our lifestyle or the filth that we spew across the internet and our movie outputs. That may play a small part with some. The real reason that that they want to do us harm and damage is because that we are trying to impose our will in the Middle East, and we are surrogates and trying to protect the safety of the hook-nosed, beady-eyed Jews in Israel who have led terrorism in the Middle East since we gave them that sandbox. The Arab knows the Jew better than anyone, and have not been persuaded by the Jew control of the media like we see in the West. Being up close and personal to a few million of these seeds of Satan, who press daily to take freedom and land from the Palestinian and others, they use Gestapo tactics that they so abhorred in World War II, and they know how to use it masterfully. Rockets, bombs, tanks, and other military tactics are used. Israel is an armed camp, and rightfully so. They should be wiped off the face of the earth. If I had a say in it, I'd give Iran, our Persian cousins over there, racial cousins, about 10 nuclear weapons and give them an F-111 and a couple of B-2s and have them go over there and annihilate that country, turn it into glass. The FBI and Homeland Security should be storming the White House and the Attorney General's office for crimes worse than anything that I or Edgar Steele ever did. Obama, mama, Obama, your nigger president, wrote in his own book that he was born in Kenya. Yet it takes independent investigators from all over the country and Sheriff Joe Arpaio of Phoenix, Arizona, to do a proper vetting of this communist that sits in the highest office of the land, while Congress and the Attorney General's office let this fraud in the White House continue the ruse of being a president for 4 years without seeking the truth. The first time in American's history that this inconceivable thing could happen. America didn't even blink. It was then that I knew America was finished. Even after the communists took hold of our institutions, I believed that we had some chance of thwarting their efforts to undermine the American way. Okay, so no longer. The party is over. The party is over. We have a fraudulent communist president. We have an attorney general who sanctions Fast and Furious and spews plausible denial and stonewalls the congressional investigation. These are the real terrorists and lawbreakers of our nation who seek to undermine all of our rights and Bill of Rights, and America still doesn't blink. The Jew bankers on Wall Street, the Department of Treasury, and the Federal Reserve Board plundered the Treasury of over $2 trillion in one fell swoop, and nobody in America blinked. We are so desensitized as Americans, we don't even know when we're getting screwed and when our freedoms are taken away willy-nilly. We are stupid walking around in a fog, and still your government is the biggest terrorist of all. You can never forget Ruby Ridge and Waco. Never forget what these jackbooted thugs did to law-abiding citizens who simply wanted to separate from society and protect their families from the colored hordes and the government itself. The government will have none of that. They will attack we free thinkers and patriots before they will ever go to a true criminal element in the country, the illegal, the Crips and the Bloods, the MS-13, the Mexican Mafia, and a host of other gangs who threaten our very lives every night in major cities. No, they want to surveil white pride organizations, white separatists, and those who speak the truth about the Jew and government abuses. Holder gave a pass to the blacks who intimidated voters at the last election. We are ruled by blacks and communists these days, and the masses are wringing their hands and wonder what went wrong with America. Well, I know what went wrong with America. We old guys know what went wrong. The FBI and others are surveilling the likes of me. I am a true patriot and an ex-military man who loves his country and knows what is happening to it and telling everyone who will listen. But you may rest assured that the government minions of the Jews will be coming after me again to silence me as they did with a few dozen others in the recent past. Lately, Mr. Edgar Steele, my dear friend, who was really getting under their craw. Your government is not your friend, and it is owned by communism and the Jewish international bankers. Once you get that burned into your psyche, you will begin to understand how and why things happen to us every day. The United States government are the real terrorists in this country. They hate true patriots and those who stand in the way of their Jew masters and who run the FBI and Congress. So, you are a suspect if you write, associate with, or protest against anything the government is supporting. If the authorities search your home and find a fuse for a rocket motor, a hobby, or chemicals such as acetone, sulfuric acid, hydrogen peroxide, ammonia, gasoline, fertilizer, antifreeze, gunpowder, PVC piping, end caps, or anything else the government has deemed to be materials to create a weapon or explosive, and there's a lot, you can and will be charged as a terrorist or for having terrorist sympathies and will lose every right you have as a citizen. Your charges will result in life in prison. Terrorists get life imprisonment. And all simply because you marched against abortion, protested the government shenanigans, and or whatever war there is at the time. Beware. Always act alone. Keep nothing in your home or vehicle that can incriminate you. Do not associate with radical elements. If you are of the mind to act on your own conscience, keep it to yourself and do whatever you're going to do, and never, never, ever, never, never speak a word about it to anyone. Don't get drunk and be bragging about anything you might have done. Terrorism at the forefront of the news. The government needs Americans to be fearful about something always. Straw man demons must be created out of whole cloth to focus the attention of the public on everything but the nefarious Jew and the nefarious activities of the government, not the least of which are the thieves which have plundered our treasury coffers and economic future, nearly all Jews and their sycophants. The FBI will vigorously investigate white-collar criminals because the feds are less apt to get their pansy asses shot off. Street gangs, spaced-out drug users, and drug cartels pose a real threat to the well-being of a federal agent, and they rarely go after these groups. If the government aggressively pursued these gangbangers, major drug dealers, and others who pose a real threat to society, there wouldn't be that many of them operating as freely as they do all over this country. There are hundreds of thousands of street criminals and gangs committing bodily harm to unsuspecting citizens, and the feds go after the accountants, stockbrokers, bankers, and business leaders. The feds are afraid to wage war on the Crips, the Bloods, the MS-13, and Mexican Mafia, and I mentioned that earlier. They would rather sit on their asses and go after those who commit victimless crimes such as smoking dope, having a firearm, and committing no crime, transacting business over the phone, which is called wire fraud, and sending an insurance claim through the mail that may or may not be exactly right. That's called mail fraud, and on and on and on. Yet they themselves commit treason each and every day by refusing to seek out and arrest illegals from the Middle East, Mexico, El Salvador, and every other third world sewer that drops their trash into our midst. They are in collusion with the New World Order elitists, and yes, Rush Limbaugh, they do exist. Okay, and the Anti-Defamation League to remove any potential threat to the agenda of the New World Order, and that includes you if you are a patriot. Not just the drug users and dealers, murderers and gangbangers and others that threaten the well-being of John Q. Public, but those who are erudite, intelligent, and have a clear understanding, like me, of what the rascals in Washington are doing to us each and every day. The government does not assent to its own laws or treaties, and I alluded to that earlier. Countries making treaties or have special relationships with America are on very dangerous ground. Our government will turn on our friends, except Israel, in a New York heartbeat. Though for those who we place in power in third world countries who are clandestine activities of the Central Intelligence Agency and the State Department, they are extreme risk for a short lifespan or a plane crash if they stray from policy. Our treaties with the Native American tribes in the United States are a farce. Not one has been honored since they were drafted and signed by the government in the early 1800s. The United States abrogates these treaties, which have the full force and authority beyond our Constitution, in the interests of expediency and control. By subjecting natives on their own reservations to federal aid through the Department of Interior, the natives accepting this aid, the government exercises total power and control of the native population. Even though the reservations are sovereign lands to the natives and by treaty they are self-governed, the government regularly sends federal authorities to demand, make arrests with the FBI, ATF, and other wise impose its will upon these nations. Double jeopardy occurs often as the nation will arrest and prosecute one of its own, and yet the same charges will be brought by the federal government and place the native under federal jurisdiction. Politics is Machiavellian politics. Machiavelli says that ruthless cunning is the appropriate conduct for government. How very true. Von Clausewitz states that war is the natural extension of politics. Every president, administration, and our unelected rulers need a good war to feed the military-industrial Congress complex and impose our will throughout the world. Hypocrites are those who rule over us. We have long forgotten that we, the people, are the rulers, not those who we elect to represent our interests or those that remain year after year behind the scenes, who are actually ruling us and our Congress. They have infiltrated and hold government as tyrants pressing against our freedoms day by day. We are frogs in the pot, just about finished being cooked. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. George Orwell said that, and he wrote 1984 in 1949. It is clear to anyone who has lived more than 65 years that Americans' history has been revised to reflect the goals of the world order elitists. Our national heroes and founding fathers have been character assassinated, demeaned, belittled, and our holidays turned over to the black, the Mexican, and the Jew. Our national Christian symbols have been systematically removed from the public consciousness, and prayer is no longer allowed in school and most public forums. Diversity and multiculturalism is destroying our morals, our culture, and our nation. Hate crime can mean anything that the government wants it to mean, but it can never be committed against a white person. Stalin, a great friend of Franklin Roosevelt and a murderer of 20 million of his countrymen, knowingly stated that it doesn't matter who votes for who. What matters is who controls the ballot box. How true. In our last 3 national elections, there's been controversy over the results of the state counts. We all have the image of that man looking near cross-eyed at the torn shard on a recounted ballot in Florida in the 2004 election. It took a Supreme Court decision to declare Bush the winner. Stalinistic communism is alive and well in America. Some electronic ballot machines were known to have been programmed to direct votes to candidates whether the citizen voted for that person or not. It is common knowledge that illegal aliens regularly vote in our elections. They vote often and they vote over and over again. Others seem to vote more than once. I just said that. With tongue-in-cheek, we say to each other, vote early and vote often. This happens more than you might think. Finally, the president selects unelected czars, and I find that an interesting term, to oversee many of our businesses and governmental departments. This is cronyism at its finest. None of these czars are qualified for these jobs, have no prior experience in these newly created government jobs. Each czar is paid well over $100,000 per year, requires a staff and offices costing several times that, not including the budgets for travel, entertainment, vehicles, and allowances. They are responsible for policy making and even have powers far exceeding any other citizen. They operate with impunity, with no oversight, and report only to the president. Congress has no say in what they can and cannot do, as well as most of those who operate behind the scenes in Washington and survived one administration to another for years and years and years. The New Order agenda in communism is moving forward very nicely in the United States of America. For those of you who have listened to me this far, it should be apparent that America is doomed as a nation. We have transitioned from a constitutional republic to a democracy, which in the root term means mob rule. It is just a matter of a few short years when the economic collapse is complete and new draconian laws are implemented under the guise of national security. May God help you and all of us and have mercy on all of us. For our disobedience and arrogance, he is through with blessing us as a people and a nation unless we take up arms and go after these traitors in Washington, D.C. Now I'm going to talk to you a little about the Bill of Rights. Now, your Bill of Rights is going once, going twice, going to the New World Order and global elitists under Jewish communism, sold to the highest bidder. Amendment 1, Congress shall make no law establishing of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right to people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Did you get that? Did you get that? Okay. Over time, minority of voices in the United States has convinced the ignorant that there is a separation of church and state clause. As evidence, there is no such thing. The Supreme Court has waffled on this issue since the 1960s. With new hate crime laws being passed, freedom of speech is slowly being taken away. Political correctness precludes statements, comments, or disparaging remarks about people, religion, races, lifestyle, and you are subject to civil suit or even criminal charges, The right to assemble in public is only granted with permission and or permits. So there goes that deal. There is no longer a redress of grievances with any elected official. They are totally unresponsive to their constituency. Congress only does what it takes to get reelected and expropriate as much money from you to give to others to sure of their continued position. Amendment 2, a well-regulated militia, being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Very simple. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, for more than 100 years, and Congress and the Supreme Court has defined a militia as a government-sanctioned entity such as the National Guard. This was never the intent of the framers and simply subterfuge to impose certain restrictions upon the citizenry of the United States. The right to keep and bear arms definition has been so bastardized by the courts so as to make one believe that we are living in the twilight zone. Today, that right has so many restrictions as to be no right at all. If you look at Title 18 of the Criminal Code, subsection 22, there's probably 30 different caveats about having arms to protect yourself. The government can now define what kind of arm you can have, how many, where it is allowed to go, who can have it, and when. Our right is infringed upon, especially if the government wants to make an example out of you. And again, I'll say, if you purchase a firearm in one state and move it to another, or if it was manufactured in one state and cross state lines, it can be claimed by the United States government that it is interfering with interstate commerce, and they can put you in prison for that. Now, whether they exercise that or not, it just depends whether they want to come after you. Okay, so Amendment 3, no soldier in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner prescribed by law. Well, so far in the United States, the government has not violated this in modern times. The Fourth Amendment, this is the one that the Patriot Act circumvents and abrogates. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by an oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Well, the United States government, its agents, prosecutors, and law enforcement violate this each and every day in their pursuit of justice. The Patriot Act and Homeland Security preclude these rights under the guise of protecting us against terrorism when they are indeed the real terrorists. Confiscation of private property is rampant in this country by law enforcement, and searches are regularly conducted without warrants issued by an affidavit or by probable cause. The Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual time of service of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice in jeopardy, double jeopardy, I talked about that, of life, liberty, and property, without due process of law. I talked about due process of law. Due process of law in America is, think about a tomato plant. The tomatoes come in the door, they cook them, they peel them, they chop them up, and they put them in cans, seal the can, put them in a case, and next. That's what you are in the criminal justice system. Okay, so due process may or may not be afforded the accused. The government can effectively circumvent double jeopardy clause, as noted before when I talked to you. Any accused not readily cooperative with the government will receive far more severe penalties than one who is willing to give up his rights to self-incrimination. The government will do anything to win a case. Sixth Amendment, well, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district in which the crime has been committed, which district shall have previously been ascertained by law and be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with witnesses against him, and to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Well, they didn't do that with Edgar Steele. They just bulldogged him right through the process, wouldn't allow Edgar's attorney to present evidence, wouldn't allow Edgar's attorney to bring in witnesses, wouldn't allow any affidavits to be brought into the court. The FBI wanted him, the Jews wanted him, the government wanted him, and they got him. Today it is common for the government to detain persons indefinitely without formal charges. Often the detainee does not have access to even legal counsel visitation. The government can hold individuals while they spend months gathering evidence, intimidating family, friends, and witnesses to assure a conviction. Charges are stacked against an accused with fines and potential sentences so severe that the accused is compelled to take a guilty plea on lesser charges as not to spend most of his life in prison. Article 7, in suits of common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by the jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any other court in the United States than according to the rules of common law. Well, this is related more to civil law than anything else. Lawyers derive their income from filing every lawsuit imaginable. The hope and expectation of large settlements, for which they receive as much as 50% of any award, drives these Shylocks with a fervor bordering on insanity. Okay, Amendment 8, excessive bail shall not be required, or excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. Well, enough cannot be said about the government's abuse of this. Bail has been discussed previously. They set $3 million bail on a DUI for me in Idaho. Anyway, fines are imposed that can never be paid. They never get paid. They will never get paid. An unusual sentence that never existed 50 years ago are imposed every day by the courts. Now, what happens to these fines that are supposed to get paid? Well, the government bundles them up, or the Jews do. The international bankers, Treasury Department, Federal Reserve Board, they bundle all these fines up and sell them as securities to foreign countries and investors. You figure it out. Anyway, the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others' rights retained by the people. The government doesn't care about the citizenry. I told you that. They don't care about you. They go through this facade. It's like high theater. It will violate the rights of the citizens anytime it suits its purpose, and they do it every day. Most cannot defend against the power and the resources of the government. They have infinite money. They have all these alphabet soup organizations. They can put 1,000 men in the field, women to investigate you, intimidate your family, and make a criminal out of you. And they don't care how long it takes and how long you while away in some detention facility while they do this. Amendment 10, the powers not delegated to the United States by Constitution nor prohibited to it by states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Well, we know that the federal government is encroaching more and more on states' rights. If a state resists the government, the government will deny financial aid to the government, imposes certain restrictions, and otherwise penalizes the state. Big Brother wants everything from cradle to grave, and it is moving quickly and forcefully to assure this. So here you go, the first 10 amendments. The government has probably trashed about 2/3 of them. They mean nothing to the government whatsoever. Your rights mean nothing to the government whatsoever if they really want you. Now on the surface, they'll read you their Miranda, and they'll give you all this fine thing and tell you what your charges are, and your fines are always prohibitive, and your sentences are always going to be too long. And then they come to you while you're just bleeding, knowing that you're never going to see your family again, and never have freedom again, and never go fishing again, and never be able to travel again, and you'll be tagged all your life. You can't get a respectable job. You can't do anything. And you're saying, I better take a deal. At least I won't spend the rest of my life in prison. And that's how these bastards do it. Now, this is Vince Berg of the 11th Hour Messenger. We got facts again today. That's what I do. I deal in facts. And if you're watching FBI, you know what? I got something for you. Hold on. Wait. It's right here. FBI. Hold on. That's what I got for you.